Hello, I'm Lars Bang Larsen. I was introduced to the model for a qualitative society when I met Palle Nielsen for the first time in 1998. Back then, Palle had been a dropout from art for around 20 years, and he was an isolated figure on the Copenhagen art scene. In general, at this point, the history of the experimental art forms of the 1960s was in many respects still waiting to be written. And symptomatically, there was no reception to speak of neither of the model nor of Palle's work in general. The art institution didn't quite know what to make of the model. Plus, I think that Palle's artist peers were somewhat envious of the fact that he had been involved in a veritable takeover of Stockholm's Moderna Museet, which was Northern Europe's most prestigious and most experimental art institution during the 1960s and 1970s. And maybe it's understandable that it was hard for art historians to figure out the model. A project beyond children's pedagogy and beyond notions of participation in art, it was an event in the true sense of the word, in which everyone involved got more than they bargained for. It was a wild mix of child power, of anti-art, of urban critique, of institutional critique, of art activist mass utopianism, and the metaphysics of the social model. So if you wanted to play wild, the modernist way, then the model was your thing. It was Palle who proposed the idea of building an adventure playground in a cultural institution, and the playground itself was his design. In this way, the adventure playground at Moderna Museet was based on his previous involvement in illegal adventure playground actions in Copenhagen that he and fellow activists conceived as an alternative protest form against urban underdevelopment. The adventure playground was open source, so to speak. And this is how it was conceived of and developed in the post-war era as a form or a non-form. Strictly speaking, it didn't take an artist to make an adventure playground. Anyone could do it. Plus, it was never complete without the agency, the play of the children. So there is an inherent paradox of authorship in the adventure playground as an artwork or as a work of anti-art. Besides, the model could never have happened without the work and support of Palle's many fellow activists in the Stockholm network Action Dialogue, including the journalist Gunilla Lundahl, nor could it have happened without the inside help of Moderna Museet curator Carlo Derkert. This not just in the sense that these people were involved in facilitating the making of the model. Instead, they were part of the larger conversation and the general intellect that were the conditions of possibility for the project. They were all part of the activist togetherness and the conflation of many bodies and minds that carried the model to its unique realization. Palle was in his mid-20s when he worked on the model. He continues to be involved in art for another decade or so. In the late 1970s, he perceived that the collective spirit that had informed the model was gone from art, and this meant that he couldn't continue as an artist on his own. Before he discontinued his career, Palle created several public art projects, including a wonderful work for the visually impaired. This is a haptic sculpture with a large variety of touchable elements made out of wood, and it's a work that still exists today at the Institute for the Blind in Copenhagen. Palle passed away in 2020, and I loved the idea of a Portuguese translation of our book about the model. For one thing, because I know that Palle loved the idea of making his work available to a Brazilian and to a Portuguese-speaking audience. In many respects, Palle's approach to art making had perhaps more in common with events such as Domingos da Criação, with Licia Clark and Elio Achesica's radical thinking of space and body, and with Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed, as with what his contemporaries in Scandinavia were doing at the time. Espero que você gostou do livro.